Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com. Today we're going to make a cranberry cream cheese tart. This is what it looks like. This is a no-bake dessert that starts with a graham crackered crust, and then we're going to fill it with a cheesecake-like filling, and then we're going to top it all off with a homemade Cranberry-Raspberry Sauce. So good. It's really a nice dessert any time of the year, but with the red and the white, it's particularly nice during the holiday season. So the first thing we need to do is to prepare our pan. Now you can use either an 8 or a 9-inch, that's 20 or 23 centimeter tart pan. And I like to use the ones with the removable bottom, which makes it so much easier to get the tart out of the pan. Now if you don't have a tart pan, you could use an 8-inch, 20 centimeter springform pan. That will work just as well. And then I like to grease the pan or butter the pan. You could use one of those non-stick sprays if you want, or you could just use a little bit of melted butter. And then with a pastry brush, just do the bottom and the sides, and that way we'll make sure our crust doesn't stick to our pan. And then we're going to start with our graham cracker crust, which is the easiest of all the pie crusts to make. If you have a food processor like I have here, that makes it really easy to do, but either way, you can make this by hand and it's really almost as easy. So you will need first 1 cup, which is 100 grams of graham cracker crumbs. Now you can buy graham cracker crumbs in a box. Personally, I prefer to make my own. I don't know why, but I think they taste better if you make them from the graham crackers. So for 1 cup, if you're buying your graham crackers, you will need about 7 of these. Now I do have, if you want to use homemade, I do have a recipe as well as a video on the site to make your own graham crackers, which is very good if you want to take the time. But now, if you're not using your food processor, I'll just show you how to make graham cracker crumbs out of graham crackers. I just take a Ziploc bag, put my graham crackers in there, and then I just use my rolling pin and then just kind of bang it like that until you get, now you want to make sure you get your graham crackers really finely crushed. I find if you leave them in too big of a lump, it doesn't make, your crust isn't quite as nice. So just keep that in mind. And that's the same if you're using your food processor, really process them. So, like I said, I have my, it's about 7 graham crackers here. I'll just put them in there. And then I'm doing something a little different here. I want to add a little bit of ginger flavor to the crust, because I think with the Cranberry-Raspberry Sauce and ginger goes very nice with that. So what I'm going to do is add a 1/2 cup, which is 50 grams of crushed ginger cookies. You can use homemade ginger cookies, or I'm actually using store-bought because I'm trying to make this really easy to make. Now, if you kind of say, I don't want a ginger flavor, then just substitute that with an extra 1/2 cup, 50 grams of your graham cracker crumbs. So either way, I'm just going to put all that in there. And then I like to put a little bit of sugar. So, and you don't have to, if you don't want to do this, you can just leave it out. But I'm going to add 2 tablespoons, which is 25 grams of a granulated white sugar. So that's that, and then I'm going to just process this until, like I said, it is finely ground. It will be a little noisy. Okay, it looks pretty good. I'll just show you. So this is what you're looking for. It's really finely ground. And then, of course, we need something to bind it together, and we're going to use some melted butter. So you will need between 6 and 7 tablespoons, that's 70 to 85 grams of melted butter. That melt it and then cool it down to room temperature. And the reason I can't give an exact amount, because it really depends how fresh those graham cracker crumbs are. If they're not quite, if they're a little, say old, or I don't want to say stale, but if they're a little older, then you might need a little more butter than if they're really fresh. So that's why there's a little bit of difference there. And so I'm not going to add all of it. I'm going to add about that 6 tablespoons, about 70 grams, and then I'll check it and see if I need the rest. So if you were doing this by hand in a bowl, again, all you do is pour over about the 6 tablespoons, 70 grams, and then just toss it with a fork. Or if you want to get your fingers in there, you can do it with your hands. So what I'm going to do is just process this just until everything's kind of mixed together. Okay, I'm just going to check this. I need a little more. You don't want it wet, but you want, when you take a handful and you kind of press it, you want it to hold together pretty well. And you can kind of tell it's still a little dry, so I'm going to add just a touch more there. So what we don't want, if you don't add enough, then it might fall apart, which we don't want later. Yeah, that's about right. So you can see, kind of really sticks together. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to dump that into our pan. And then I'm just going to use my fingers to press it in the bottom and up the sides. Now, if you were using a springform pan, then just press your crumbs about 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters up the sides of your springform pan. Or really, I guess if you don't even have that, you could use just a regular pie pan if you don't mind not being able to take it out of the pan. Just cut the slices right there in the pan. That's fine as well. So just press it down. Try to get an even layer as best as you can. And then sometimes I just take a spoon, back of a spoon, and even it out. I really like to press it down there, compact it. Because there's 2 ways to set a graham cracker crust. One is to bake it, and you could do that just for a little bit. You could put it in a 350 degree Fahrenheit, which is 180 degree oven, for about 6 to 8 minutes, just until you can kind of see it's set. But because I like this to be a no-bake dessert, so I'm not going to bake it. The other way to set this crust is to just cover it and put it in the fridge for 10-15 minutes and just chill it, and you're done. So that's what I'm going to do. And when we come back, we will start our filling. So now we're going to make our filling, which I kind of call like a no-bake cheesecake filling. And that means there isn't any eggs in it. Essentially, it's cream cheese and whipping cream, what's not to like? So the first thing I want to do is to whip our cream. So you will need 1 cup, which is 240 milliliters of cold heavy cream or heavy whipping cream. And that's cream with a 35 to 40% butterfat content, which means when we whip it, it will hold stiff peaks. So do is now you can beat this by hand or with a stand mixer or a hand mixer, whatever you like to use. I prefer, especially if I'm doing it by hand, to use a metal bowl, and you could actually chill that bowl first, and that will even help even more. But make sure your cream is cold to start. And then, now if you're going to do it by hand, which you can, and it's actually really good exercise, and you would just have, you know, a big wire whisk and just whisk it. And actually heavy cream, because there's so much fat in it, is actually pretty easy to whip by hand. So you would just, I just go back and forth like this. And, you know, it could take a couple minutes. But actually, as you can see, it's already starting to thicken up. Okay, so arm is a little tired, but this is what we're looking for, as you can see. So like I said, that only took me a minute, maybe 2 at the most. And like I said, a little exercise is not bad for anybody. So I'm going to put that aside. And then we need our cream cheese. So you will need 1 8-ounce package, which is about 225 grams. And I like to use a full-fat cream cheese. And have your cream cheese at room temperature, because we are going to beat it. And if it's room temperature, it's a lot easier, because we want to get that nice and smooth. So I am going to use my hand mixer for this. If you want to do it by hand, I would probably use probably a wooden spoon for this. Okay, so I've got it kind of pretty good. So now I'm going to add a 1/4 cup, 50 grams of granulated white sugar for a little sweetness. And then I like to flavor it with 1 teaspoon, about 5 grams of pure vanilla extract. I mean, you could use another type of extract if you want, or you could actually probably add the zest of like a lemon, lime, orange if you would prefer that. So I'm just going to beat this just until it gets all nice and creamy and smooth. So at this point, the important thing is we want to get all the lumps out of that cream cheese, and we want to get a little air. So that's what you're doing at that step. So now, of course, we got a heavier mixture, the cream cheese, and we have our whipped cream, which is quite light. So we got to mix the two together. I'm going to do this by hand to show you. Now, I don't add all my cream at once. I'm going to add, I'll just put like maybe what's that, about 1/2 cup, maybe, just a dollop in there to lighten it. And then that will make, and I'm going to use like a little whisk. You could use your spatula just to whip that in, and that will lighten. And then it'll make it so much easier to add the rest of our cream. And at the same time, we can make sure if there was any lumps in our cream cheese, that whisking will make sure we'll get rid of those. And then add a little more here. This is a great, kind of a last minute type of dessert. You don't want to do, spend a lot of time in the kitchen. And you can make this the day before, or a couple days before, actually. And we all need kind of like those desserts that are easy for us and yet impress everybody. I mean, I've yet to find anybody when I serve this that doesn't like it. So just fold that, and we're done. And so now I'm just going to put it into our chilled tart shell. And at this point, that's why, you could make this a day or two ahead. You do want to chill it until it gets nice and cold and firms up, so then it makes, then when we slice it, you get a really nice clean slice. Okay. And then you can just use the back of a spoon, or I'm using an offset spatula, just to smooth it out. Try to get an even layer. And then what I'm going to do, like I said, I'm going to cover it and put it back into the refrigerator, and I'm going to let it chill, at least a couple hours, preferably a little longer. And then when we come back, we're going to make the cran-raspberry sauce. Okay, now for our cran-raspberry sauce, which you can make like several days in advance if you want to do that. So you will need a medium-sized saucepan with fairly high sides, because there is a tendency when we're cooking the sauce for it to kind of sputter. And the first thing you need is 3 cups, which is 300 grams, and I'm using frozen unsweetened raspberries. Now, if the fresh raspberries are in season, you could use 3 cups, 300 grams of fresh raspberries. And I didn't even bother to thaw out my raspberries because we're going to cook them anyways, but you could. Put that in there. And of course, cranberries. So you will need 2 cups, 200 grams. Now you can use, I'm using fresh cranberries, you could use frozen. And whenever you buy cranberries, make sure you wash them and pick through them, because a lot of times there is some soft ones, mushy ones, which you want to take out. So let's keep that in mind, put that in there. And then of course, because raspberries and especially cranberries are quite sour, we need some sugar. So I'm using about 3/4 of a cup, which is 150 grams of granulated white sugar. You can adjust that. If you want a really sweet sauce, you could probably go up to at least a cup or 200 grams. So, what I would do is start out with the 3/4 of a cup, and then, at the end, if you taste your sauce and go a little sour, you could always add more sugar. So now what I'm going to do is put this on, medium-high heat. And then what we're going to do is just cook this until, you want the raspberries have to thaw out and the sugar has to melt, and you want the cranberries to cook and kind of get really soft, and then they usually kind of pop open. You will find your raspberries are going to break right down, and that's good. That'll give us a nice sauce. And then once this comes to a boil, we're just going to cook it for probably maybe 10 minutes until it's nice and thick. You can adjust the consistency of your sauce by how long you cook it. If you want a fairly thin one, you cook it a little less than if you want to really almost like a jam. So now just, keep stirring it every once in a while, and we're going to bring this up to a boil. Okay, so we have it at a good boil. As you can see here, it's really bubbling and getting foamy. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to turn the heat down. I still want it to be boiling, bubbling. If you ever made jam, it just kind of bubbles away there. So what we're going to do is we want those cranberries to kind of pop open and soften, and then you want the juices to become quite thick. So, depending on how much of a boil you have yours at, I would say close to probably 10 minutes. And then just stir it every once in a while. Okay, so cran-raspberry sauce is now done. So I'm just going to pour it into this measuring cup. You get about 2 cups, 480 milliliters of sauce when you cook it down. That's about right, I guess. And then if you want, at this point, you could add a little grated lemon zest or orange or lime if you like. And so I'm going to add some lemon. Always wash your lemons, and then you want to make sure when I'm using one of these like microplanes, but you can just use a regular box grater. But make sure you just get the yellow outer skin, not that white underneath, which is a little bitter. So, you can add as much or as little zest as you want and just stir that in. So this is what we have. As you can see, it's still really hot. We'll have to let that cool down. But I like it about that thick. I'll show you once it's done. And then this one, I did yesterday, so I'm going to kind of A/B it to show you because when it's hot, it's going to be more liquid than once you chill it. It will firm up. So you got to kind of keep that in mind when you're cooking your sauce, because this, see if you can see, it's pretty liquid, but it will firm up if you have it like that to about like this, or like after a day, almost like a jam. So if you don't want it this thick, then just keep that in mind and just don't cook your the sauce as much on the stove. So now what you want to do is let this cool off and then cover it and put it in the fridge. I prefer to make this the day before. One, so it gets nice and firm. And the other is I find when you make something like a sauce like this, it takes a little time for the flavors to develop. So, you know, and it's a great do ahead too. So that's what I'm going to do. And then when we come back, we will try a piece. Okay, so now we're ready to remove the sides of our tart pan. So what I like to do is just pick up my tart pan, have my thumbs on top, and then have the rest of my fingers, if you can see, on the bottom plate. And then what I do is just gently kind of go around and push up on that bottom plate, my thumbs here, and just make sure it gets loose all the way around, not sticky. And then once you think it's loosened, then I have a cup here, or some kind of cup, upside down, and then just put your tart on there, and then hopefully the sides of your pan will fall away. And I normally leave it on that bottom plate just because that's easier to cut. I mean, you could take a spatula, a flat spatula, and kind of, once it's really cold, and try to, if you want to separate it from the bottom plate. And then when we're ready to cut. Now, some people, I mean, there's a couple ways you can do this. I prefer to leave the tart like this and let everyone serve themselves with the sauce as much or as little as they want. You could decorate the top or put the sauce right on top if you know that everybody wants that. And then if your knife gets a lot of the filling on, just wipe it off with a paper towel. Like so. And hopefully separate. There we go. There we go. So, whoops, noisy. So there we have it. And then you could serve your cranberry-raspberry sauce. Now, if you don't want to, some people may not like the cranberry-raspberry sauce. You know, you could use just fresh berries. You could have a lemon curd or strawberry sauce, raspberry sauce, blueberry sauce, whatever. I mean, you don't have to have just that. But I really like the combination. So I'm going to have here, we'll have it all. That's a really nice combination of flavors. You got that kind of grainy graham cracker crust with just a hint of ginger. I mean, and a rich cheesecake, I mean, cream cheese, just with the whipping cream, a little bit of vanilla. And then, of course, I really like that tart and tangy yet sweet cranberry-raspberry sauce. I think I mean, no one will know that this was quite an easy dessert to make. And if you have leftover sauce, I like it just sprayed on some bread or biscuits, scones, or you could even use it to fill some tart shells. So enjoy, and until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.